Good evening, everybody. I think I have everything more or less under control here. My head is up against the pillow. I almost have the camera high enough. I have it sitting on something steady so my shakiness doesn't disturb everybody with the video. Anyway, good evening, everybody. It's Sunday, June 23rd. And I keep saying I'm going to do more videos. I actually have 185 videos on this channel. Some of you may have noticed that I've disappeared off of Facebook and Instagram. I got kicked off. I had a 5-star rating and I had followers and quite a few followers and I was busy on Facebook and Instagram, and then I got booted off and I couldn't get back on. and I tried and I ended up in this loop, do this, do that, do the next thing, and then you get back to the beginning and it says do it all over again. I've had 2 or 3 different people try to work through it and they got on the same runaround, and so I said, you know what, I'm better off not being on Facebook. I have more hours in the day to paint and look after my fish and my apartment. My bed's made, my apartment's relatively tidy, my dishes are washed, and I can paint sometimes 6-7 hours a day. And my eyes aren't feeling like I've been rolling in dry sand. So not being on Facebook there is life after Facebook is what I'm trying to say. So anyway, but I have this tendency in the evening, I'll get on YouTube and I'll watch all these endless things, these little short videos that are very interesting about an enormous number of topics, and I can spend 2 or 3 hours and then I think, I've just wasted that time and I'm never going to get it back. So rather than doing that, I could make more videos. So this morning I had booked on my calendar with a very dear friend who began as a student. She worked with me for 10 years, traveled quite some distance back and forth to come and have lessons. I boarded her horse. It was a horse that I bred and raised. And so she traveled back and forth from North Vancouver 5-6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, and worked full time. And so we became very close. And so because we both tend to, she's also single, has never been married, so we both tend to get in our apartments and do our own thing and kind of hibernate. And so we had a conversation a couple of months ago and really enjoyed our conversation. We're talking about all sorts of things. And I said, what we should do is book appointments with each other so that we actually have conversations. So we do that. We book a 2 to 4 hour conversation about every 2 to 4 weeks, and it's most enjoyable, and we both learn lots. So we talked about all sorts of things today, and it made me think I really need to get back on my YouTube channel, partly because I'm not working with horses currently. I could, but I want to paint, and I probably will work with one particular horse and the people affiliated with that horse, the big red mare, I call her. But that'll be later this summer, early fall. But in the meantime, I'm really enjoying painting. But the other thing that happens, because I have a massage table, a professional massage table, and I do from time to time work on people. Um, People that come to me because they're hurting, they're just hurting from life experiences, or maybe they got hurt at work, or they had a fall, or um, a joint quit working, or whatever. And they come and get on my table, and um, we we talk as I'm working on them, because it's a just something that I do. And so a lot of times I find that the people that come to me have issues. They're either in a relationship that they're not happy with, possibly with one of their children, or their spouse, or their bosses, or they're not happy with themselves, they're in conflict within themselves. And I remember as a little kid, preschool little kid, I was very happy. But then once I started school, and you have all that peer group pressure, and I didn't fit in. I'm left-handed. I've been extremely short-sighted. I was born that way, and I grew up in an isolated situation. There weren't kids of my own age. I grew up around grandparents and my parents and my two brothers, which have both passed away now. But I never had close friends of my own age when I was a preschooler. So when I started going to school, I was very shy. I didn't wear glasses at that point because nobody knew how short-sighted I was, and I was really a square peg in a round hole. And so then all sorts of things changed at home. Grandparents sold the place out on the prairies, and they moved in with us. And Granny Hart was she was somebody that my mother loved her mother dearly, deeply. Um, um, Everybody else of Granny Hart, and I hated her. She was a battle axe. And so between the pressures at school and being short-sighted and my home life, I was absolutely miserable, absolutely miserable. And by the time I was 16, I was so conflicted that I actually sat with a loaded handgun to my temple for a couple or 3 hours. Everybody was away from home at that time. It just was one of those things. And I didn't have, I guess I wasn't hurting badly enough to pull the trigger. I didn't have the courage to pull the trigger. And I had things that I wanted to do. I was deeply into my music career as a performing stage artist, as an instructor, as a competitive concert musician. I had a lot of things going for me, but I was so intensely miserable. So after that experience, and I almost never talk about that, because I had reached such a low point in my life, and I seriously thought, I don't want to live the rest of my life feeling this miserable. I don't want to do that. But if I don't have what it takes to shoot myself in the head with a 44 caliber bullet, which would have really messed me up, it would have been a closed casket funeral, that's a for sure thing. Anyway, if I didn't have the guts to do that, then I better figure this thing out. That doesn't mean that anything changed right at that moment, but it meant that I became a seeker. I wanted to know how things worked. I wanted to know how the human body worked. I wanted to know how the brain worked. I wanted desperately to understand that. And I really wanted to do horses. And so, but my dad had instilled in me that as a woman, I would never be able to support myself, and that I needed to find a man and become married and become a housewife. And that I was incapable of being self-sufficient. And I kind of bought that for a while, except that that was I chose very poorly, and I divorced. And the good thing about that was, by that time I was old enough to be independent. I didn't need to have my dad say, well, you can't do this and you can't do that. He was still doing that, but I didn't take the bait, not completely. I didn't drink the whole jar of Kool-Aid. So at that point, I went to England. And when I went to England, I was there as a working student at a very high level equestrian facility. And one of their main goals was training people to become certified with the British Horse Society. But once again, I ran into all these conflicted people, but some of them were in a position of authority to tell me what to do and when to do it and how to do it. And others were kids that were like me, that were there to become certified, but they did what they were told to do, even though they were desperately and miserably unhappy about doing that. And there were a few incidences, and I can remember very clearly that at one point, Mr. Geoffrey Hutton, who was a high-seated fellow of the British Horse Society, he called us all together, and he said, I'm really unhappy with your performance, and if you don't shape up pretty quick, some of you can leave. If you don't like it, you don't have to stay here. And so he went through everybody one at a time to say, you know, what's wrong? What are you so upset about? What are you so angry about? And I deliberately put myself at the end of the line, and I listened to what everybody had to say, and they were all too afraid to express themselves. And so by the time he got to me, I looked him straight in the eye and I told him exactly what was going on. And I said, if you're going to punish us by telling us to move the manure pile from point A to point B, I said, I won't do it. It's just that simple. I said, ask me to go pick weeds and, you know, poisonous weeds in the paddocks. Ask me to mow the lawn. Ask me to, you know, do something that's positive and constructive. But I said, I'm not into this punishment thing. I said, that isn't going to happen. And the funny thing is that I gained his respect. But there's a problem with that, because what that taught me, that lesson, was that I could defend myself in a way that would gain me respect and more freedom They took me on trips and they took me places and did things for me that that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have stood up for myself. But having said that, it taught me a state of mind. It taught me to be, I think the word is aggressive. It taught me to get what I wanted, or not have to do what I didn't want to do. But what it didn't teach me was personal self-confidence. It didn't teach me anything about managing my own emotional or mental state. It 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 taught me to be tough. And that kind of toughness gets us into more trouble almost than if we go the other way and become a doormat. So when people come to me to do body work, circling back to that comment, I find a lot of people are really struggling with that same problem. And not just women, men have that problem too. I worked on a young man recently, and he was talking about his relationship with his father and his mother, and how he feels very obligated to go back to his home and look after his mom and their properties because the dad failed in that regard. And he's very adamant about that. And I didn't try to change his ideas about that, because that's kind of like trying to push water upstream. I mean, it's not the way to go about it. But if we can learn a different way than being unhappy and miserable, because happiness is something that we have within ourselves. We can't be happy because we're looking after a sick aging parent. that doesn't bring us personal happiness. We can't find personal happiness if we have a barn full of beautiful horses and they all have owners and they're customers, and you're training the horses and coaching the people as riders, and they all worship the ground you walk on, but you're miserable within yourself. So you can you can have what looks like a seemingly wonderful, beautiful family on the outside, have $1 million home and all the bells and whistles and toys that people consider necessary for a happy life, but be absolutely miserable in your relationship with your spouse. Absolutely miserable. And worse than that, you don't want to leave it, because it means you're going to have to give up so much that you really consider worthwhile. But at the same time, you're unhappy, and you don't know how to change any of that. And unfortunately, nobody gives us the tools. So if your husband, for example, or your wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is, if they say something that rubs your fur the wrong way and you get huffy about it, then it's pretty easy to throw dart back at them. Another long-term student that lived with me for 4 years, she is really cute. she says, I came to have an interview to study with you. I came for a week and I stayed for 4 years. And she's happily married to a wonderful man, and who I also know, and they came and visited me really recently, and she says we're the McBickers, because she says we bicker at each other all the time. We never really fight, but we bicker. And you throw these little darts, but you don't have the tools, I think, is the best way. You can't, we lack the language, we lack understanding of how to control our brain hormones through breathing and body language. Nobody talks about that. We're reactive. We're like a mouse on a wheel running in a wire cage to exercise ourselves, but we just keep doing what we do because that's the only thing that we know to do. But we don't have to do that. There are other ways, but it takes courage, it takes practice, and it takes often it takes somebody to support you to change those concepts. And I want to talk about that kind of stuff because I lived that. I spent a good portion of my life not being responsible for my own emotional state. It was easy for me to blame somebody or blame a situation. I remember one day, it was early winter, late fall, and it was here in the Langley area. So the outdoor arena had hog fuel and wood chips in it, and there was a little bit of frost. It was kind of crunchy, and something had happened. Not a big thing, just an inconvenience. And I mean, my dad he'd passed away 10 or 15 years before this, and I caught myself saying, God damn it, Dad, this is all your fault. And I stopped that. I remember standing on that semi-frozen outdoor arena footing on a beautiful early winter morning. I'm there early all by myself, looking after the horses and whatnot, getting ready to spend the day training and coaching. And I stopped in my tracks and I thought, what am I doing? Still being mad at my dad, who's been gone for a decade or more. I mean, come on, lady, that's nuts. That's really nuts. I mean, did my dad make a lot of mistakes with me? Absolutely. Big mistakes that totally messed me up badly, and he didn't even know it. But at some point I had to become responsible for myself. I had to take on my own baggage and deal with it. But I'd already done a lot of studying and a lot of research, and I'd taken a lot of courses, and I'd talked to a lot of different professional people on different levels, and I had the tools. All I had to do was implement those tools. But that means you've got to be responsible for yourself. That's a big deal. That's a big part of it, because it's easy to blame. It's easy to want somebody else to be responsible for your happiness and your well-being. But the actual honest to goodness truth of the matter is that we have to be responsible for ourselves, and unless or until we come to that realization, we're not going to be able to be happy within ourselves, because happiness is something that comes from within. It's not. I live in a beautiful environment, absolutely beautiful environment, and I know a lot of people really love this area, but they're still miserable within themselves. So if we can move from a really bad situation to the best situation in the world that you can possibly imagine, but we carry our conflicts within ourselves wherever we go. And it's like having a shadow. I mean, the shadow, unless you step into total darkness, that shadow is going to follow you wherever you go. And so I think for me to ramble like this about our inner happiness, I think it's important. And I'm going to be 80 in a couple of weeks, and I feel the need to be able to talk about some of this stuff really honestly and openly. I think it's really important. And if it helps you, wonderful. If you think I'm just a babbling old lady that likes to sit in front of her cell phone camera and flap her bottom jaw, then don't worry about it. Anyway, love you all. That's been 26 minutes, so I'm going to say good night. I hope this does something to create a little awareness for you. And drop a comment, share with your friends. I've got 70 some subscribers. I'd love to make it more than that if you feel compelled to do that, or anything like that. Wonderful. And don't be afraid to leave a comment. Thank you, and have a wonderful week coming up. It's going to be Canada's birthday pretty soon. That's a pretty big deal. Anyway, good night, everybody. Love you all.